Ladies and gentlemen, the Minnesota Wild are now 7-2 under John Hynes as they beat the Vancouver Canucks 2-1 in a shootout. Let's talk about overtime. Let's talk about the penalty kill. Let's talk about Damon Hunt. All that and more as we break down today's win. Join us, won't you, for today's Locked On Wild postcast.
You are Locked On Wild postcast, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And that's right. We are your team every day. Today's Locked On Wild postcast is ready to roll as the Minnesota Wild pick up a 2-1 shootout win over the Vancouver Canucks. And a little bit of revenge after what happens to the Wild in Vancouver the last time these two teams matched up. But there's a lot to pull from this game, to say the least, and a lot of encouraging things that we continue to see from the Wild. John Hynes continuing to kind of define his go-to players in critical situations. In overtime that was just boring, to say the least. And so I that's going to have to be a bigger conversation, I think, about what to do to make it so that 3-on-3 overtime isn't basically just playing a game of tag, but a lot of good that the Wild were able to do in this game against a Vancouver team that was that's a good Vancouver team that the Wild played. And Casey DeSmith certainly up to the test here today. He was challenged a lot in this game. A lot of shots right up in front of him, which is good. That's something that we called for and have called for throughout the season. But DeSmith was huge in this one. Filip Gustavsson just was better. And it led to, it's now 6-1 in the last 7 starts for Gus Bus. He ranks near the top of the leaderboard in the NHL in every goalie category since John Hynes took over, because I think something that has helped a little bit, in addition to Gus kind of finding himself, is that we've gone back to the clearly defined goalie and backup. Like, we don't have the you're going to start and you're going to start and you're going to start. It has been right back to Gustafsson is our guy, and he's going to get the majority of the starts. He started 7 of the 9 games since John Hynes took over. And John Hynes, coming from Nashville, where he had UC Saros, who is in a similar workload type goalie. So he knows a thing or two about having a number one guy and giving them the opportunity to get that number one level starts. And Gustafsson has rewarded the team by and large. I want to dive in because I know the penalty kill went 5 for 5, and I'm curious as to if anybody else had a similar reaction to what we saw today. Honestly, like, applause for the Wild penalty kill being able to go 5 for 5 against a very dangerous Vancouver penalty power play. I thought the Vancouver power play was off today. Like, did anybody else notice? It just seemed like they were a fraction off in this game, whether it be passes out to the top that were jumping over sticks, shots that just players were missing on. And so again, full send credit to the Wild penalty kill for keeping Vancouver's powerful play from getting going. But it definitely felt like it wasn't a Vancouver power play that was clicking on all cylinders. So I feel like the Wilds got out of this game on the fortunate side, because it seemed as though it was always a situation of, are you going to take one too many penalties to put yourself in a situation that the penalty kill ends up hurting you? It didn't here today. And I was surprised, I guess, at just how kind of tight this game was. Obviously, you've got good goalies on both ends. And so the opportunities not as frequent as we've seen against some of the other teams the Wild have played recently. But again, we see this D-core do some really good things to limit Vancouver from getting some of those really, really good looks that they were trying to get. Once again, you've got Brock Faber, who is the workhorse, over 30 minutes again in tonight's game, and he just has the look. And this has been talked about everywhere recently. He has the look of a guy that's going to be an incredibly good defenseman in this league because he has poise, he has instincts, he has knowledge of what needs to happen anytime he's out there on the ice, and he has the execution as well. He has all of these critical areas that you look for in many different aspects for key defensemen in the NHL. Brock Faber has them already in his first full season in the NHL. Dude's going to be just an insanely good defenseman. And so the fact that the Wild were able to get him, I know it came at the expense of Kevin Fiala, but the fact that the Wild were able to get him to be just the natural turnover point, the natural handoff of the baton when Jared Spurgeon and Jonas Brodin reach the end of their careers, it's perfect. And so I love the fact that, and I know it was mostly due to circumstance with Jared Spurgeon not being able to play in this one. I love the fact that we are seeing top power play time for Brock Faber, top penalty kill time for Brock Faber, overtime for Brock Faber. Every critical situation that you look for in top defensemen, he's already doing it. So that's one of the things that I think really excites me the most about what we've seen since John Hynes took over is he's allowing these younger players to step into these key moments and allowing them to make the plays. Because let's backtrack a little bit to the penalty kill. Guess who was the fourth defenseman on the penalty kill here today? Alex Goligoski? No. John Merrill? Thank God, no. It was Damon Hunt. Damon Hunt got an opportunity to play on the penalty kill as the fourth defenseman for the Wild, because obviously your top penalty killers defensively are going to be Middleton and Faber, but then Bogosian and Hunt getting the other majority of the penalty kill minutes is absolutely how that should be. And so kudos to John Hynes for giving Damon Hunt an opportunity, and he was pretty pointed about it before the game. He said, we want to give Damon Hunt an opportunity to see what he's able to do. And I thought he looked good in this one. So I love the fact that we are getting an opportunity to see him. Now, we still are seeing particular players that are in the starting lineup that maybe we don't need to see as much of. And it's to the point now where I'm wondering if the call to keep particular players in the lineup is coming from the head coach or if it's coming from higher up. It could be that the decision to play particular guys on the back end of the defense is coming from higher up the ladder. Now that's just my tinfoil hat for that. I have nothing to go off of in that regard, but I just would love to see Mermis and Hunt get an opportunity together in this one. Because, hey, let's give another shout out to a guy who I think there was some head scratching when he was brought onto the team. How about Zach Bogosian again tonight? I know he was called for one of the penalties that that the Wild had to try to kill off during the course of this game. But he got 18 minutes in this one. And it seems like, especially since Spurgeon has been hurt, and especially since Brodin has gone down, You assumed that Brock Faber was going to be the go-to defenseman, that Jake Middleton was going to be next. Zach Bogosian has slid up the pecking order to a number 3 reliable defenseman for the Wild in the absence of both Spurgeon and Brodin. And I know he's not a guy that you're going to want to rely on for top minutes per se, but he's a veteran. He knows what he is. He knows what he isn't. And like, you can't deny that his play has been better since those two guys have gone out of the lineup. And so when Spurgeon comes back, you feel pretty good about the fact that you would have Spurgeon, Middleton, Bogosian, and Faber as your top 4. You feel pretty good about that group going to battle every game. It's that bottom pairing that continues to just be a little bit of a head scratcher. So I, there are still some things that are kind of, there are still some things that are out there that you laugh, kind of, you chuckle because the team is winning. And there are some things that you're like, ha ha ha, I hope that doesn't end up coming back to bite us at some point. And on the Kaprizov front, because I'm seeing the comments section, which is why I laughed, because there were some comments about a couple players in particular that just made me chuckle. So we'll get to the comments section here in a little bit, but I do want to talk about the Kaprizov situation as well, because we continue to see Kaprizov not be able to. He had some opportunities in this one, wasn't able to get on the score sheet from a goals perspective. I have a thought on that situation that we'll talk about here in a second, but obviously the big takeaway, Filip Gustavsson just continues to look like a number 1 goalie again. He looks like every bit of what he was last year, and he has stood back up and said, all right, guys, I got you, against some pretty tough teams over his last 7 starts. And so Wilder, they said it, the broadcast. Now, I don't agree with the notion that this team is back to 500, because let's go to school here for a second. The Wild are 12-12-4. They have 4 overtime losses, but guess what? Those still count as losses. So it's not 500. You have 4 losses that just took longer to happen than regular losses. So this team is still 12-16, but they're just 2 points out of a playoff spot right now. And they have a game in hand on almost everybody in the division and in the Western Conference. And so there are some things that are encouraging about what we've seen. And the fact that the Wild are now 2 points out of a playoff spot, that's where we ride. That's what we want. And so a lot to further dive into here in this one. I can already tell this is going to be a long postcast, but hey, that's fine. We got a lot to discuss here in this one. So let's pause for just a second, and we'll come back. We'll take your comments, and we'll further break down a 2-1 shootout win for the Minnesota Wild as we continue today's Locked On Wild postcast after this. Today's Locked On Wild postcast is brought to you by Game Time. Folks, the holiday season is here, and if you are buying tickets to a concert, to watch the Wolves, to watch the Wild, to watch the Vikings, if you're buying tickets for those events over the holiday season and beyond, there's nothing worse than trying to find tickets that are too expensive, or worse, buying tickets for somebody in your family or a friend or whatever, and getting to the event and finding that your view is obstructed. Game Time is here to make the ticket buying experience as stress-free as possible. They offer last-minute deals plus views of every single seat in the venue. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Today's Locked On Wild postcast also brought to you by FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, except if you're in Minnesota, because it hasn't yet, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is incredibly easy to use with a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. If you picked the Minnesota Wild to prevail in this one today, hopefully you took the under, and hopefully you took a Freddy Gaudreau anytime goal. Those were both some bets that cashed in today's win against the Vancouver Canucks. All that and more by visiting FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Welcome back to today's Locked On Wild postcast. The Minnesota Wild pick up a 2-1 shootout win over the Vancouver Canucks as they improve to 12-12-4. Let's get to your comments here for today's Locked On Wild postcast. We start with Mike. Nice win. Gus and Zuccarello really came up big in this one today. And we talked about the Gustavsson numbers. He's 6-1 in his last 7 starts. His goals against average and save percentage are either tops or near the top of the list in the NHL since he was given the opportunity to be that number one guy. I know the logic behind the alternating starts for your goalies, but it ends up creating a situation in which you're basically penalized after a good start. You are given the opportunity to get back on track after a bad start. But the fact that they're riding the hot hand with Gustavsson right now, which we expected and hoped would be the hot hand all season, you go back to what John Hynes had in Nashville with UC Saros. Pretty easy for him to be the number one guy, but not forcing a guy in to the net because he hasn't played in a hot minute, and just going with a guy that is in full rhythm, full groove, is making some great saves, and is continuing to just put this team in position to win night in, night out. That's all you can hope for from your goalie, and Filip Gustavsson has done that in spades, and just continues to be great for the Minnesota Wild here over the last 7 starts ever since he was put back in as the number one guy. Crafty Auntie, I thought Kirill was a little sluggish. Defense was certainly the adventures of the good, the bad, and Merrill. Yeah, we're all in tandem here about the fact that you continue to just try to limit the exposure of that third pairing. And John Merrill today had honestly, I was floored at the number of minutes that he played in this game today, because you want to talk about overloading Brock Faber with minutes in a game, and Faber checked in with a 31-34 on this game. Folks, if we continue to give John Merrill 10 minutes and 6 seconds of ice time a night, you are at major risk of overloading him. If you continue to I can't even do it with a straight face. 10 minutes and 6 seconds for John Merrill, which at some point you have to wonder, are you really getting enough to be able to throw somebody that little on the ice? Is the upside really that much to throw a guy on the ice for that little time – in a game in which you went to overtime and you went to a shootout? what would be the harm? Like, what are you really risking by giving that 10 minutes and 6 seconds to Dakota Mermis and maybe not having to have Brock Faber out there for 31 minutes or Jake Middleton out there for 27 minutes or Zach Bogosian out there for 21-28? Damon Hunt played 14 minutes, 44 seconds in this game tonight. I think that should be the good thing that we see here is that he outpaced Johnny Vibes, but I mean 10 minutes and 6 seconds is like when an NFL team gets one possession in the first half and they just cannot get back on the field. Like, give it to somebody else. That's all I'm saying. And on the Kirill front, because B also noting that Kaprizov went top shelf on the shootout and came up short. So I think we are fully in a dual dichotomy here with Kaprizov. I think he is still, because Michael Russo talked about this and has talked about it. Dean Evison talked about it after he was fired. I think he still is dealing with the injury, still is trying to figure out how to play through the injury, not sure what to do while dealing with the injury, and now also is pressing, is trying to do. Kaprizov in the shootout was about as automatic as you could get, but now he's trying to force it. He's trying to push it. And these last two shootout attempts that he's had, he goes flying up the ice and tries to, before the goalie can figure out what's going on, tries to tuck one high. He's rushing, he's pushing because of that pressure. And my take on this is that the hope is that he gets this figured out. Thankfully, the team is able to win now without him scoring, so that when some of these other players that kind of are on track right now fall back down a little bit, that maybe he can be the one to step in and to take the heat off of them. But the fact that they're winning right now without him contributing from a points perspective really at all is good. But it's, at some point, if he could just have, and maybe it'll be against Montreal, because spoiler alert, Montreal has not gotten any better since the Wild played them and had that game where they had 3 special teams goals against the Montreal's not any better. And so maybe that can be kind of a get right game for Kaprizov to get, 2 goals, take some of that pressure off of him to have to try to find different ways to score. He's still trying to figure out the right way to do the things that he wants to do while also dealing with some clear limitations. And so he's stuck in between, I think, at this point. And the longer that happens, the more problematic it is, but it's something that he is going to have to get to the point that he figures out. Otherwise, those zeros are going to continue to happen here for Kirill the Thrill. Tyler joining us. Great game by Hunt. Freddy stepped up by just when things were looking lost for him. Zuccarello pulling an Uno reverse, being the shootout hero. Gus was easily the first star. And yes, Gus was the first star here tonight. This is interesting because this is another one of those narratives from this game that I think is fun to pull from, in that we haven't seen, since John Hynes took over, we haven't seen I'm going to call it the Freddy Force. We haven't seen Freddy Gaudreau stuffed up into the top 6, because he's been the third line guy every game since John Hynes took over. And there hasn't even been an inkling to try to shove him up into the top 6, because the spots that should be occupied at least from the center perspective in those top two lines, are currently taken by Joel Eriksson Ek and Marco Rossi. And that's how it should be every game this season. And so I think that has led to Gaudreau maybe not being asked as much that he has been, but I think we also have to keep in mind that that injury that Gaudreau suffered at the hands of Ryan Reeves against Toronto, pretty serious. And so him being able to move past it now and get back to actually playing has led to him looking much better since he recovered. I think also the fact that he's not being forced into one of those top six spots has just helped him play more of his game as opposed to having to play a style that you expect from a guy in the top six. And that has been something that we haven't seen a ton of, with the exception of Marcus Johansson, who, hey, let's give some applause, because Marcus Johansson on a couple of different occasions in today's game actually skated up to the goalie and got shots on net, which is an improvement over what we've seen from earlier in the season, where he just skates directly past the net into the corner for some reason, doesn't get a shot, or in the case of the Calgary Flames game, skates right up to the net and at the last second tries to pass it across the crease to Zuccarello for a shot that he never has an opportunity to get off because he's too close to the net, because he didn't assume that he was going to be the one getting the shot. So props for Johansson, I guess, for actually shooting into this game. But with the exception of that, we really haven't seen a ton of, like, we have to force a guy into this spot because I think he can be in that spot. It's been a lot more of your minutes are earned, because again, look at the minute count in today's game. Joel Eriksson Ek, 22 minutes, 47 seconds. Led the team, as it should be. Kaprizov had 22 minutes, and I know there are lulls with what Kaprizov is doing right now, but Kaprizov is somebody that should be one of your top minute getters, because once he gets going, once he figures this all out, he's going to be one of the leaders for this team, especially offensively. After that, it was Matt Boldy, 18 minutes. And then beyond that, you've got Zuccarello at 16:55, Gaudreau at 16:03, Johansson had 15:49, and then Foligno at 14:57. But the point being here, Rossi with 14:37 tonight, by the way. But the point being that Ek, Kaprizov, and Boldy should be the guys leading pretty much every night. And so the fact that they were, again, here tonight is just something that Coach Hynes continues to use the guys, as opposed to throwing Freddy 19 minutes or whatever else. Hynes is going with the combinations that put this team in the best opportunity to win, and they continue to do so. Tyler also noting the penalty kills looking good lately, but I sure wish we saw them a lot less. And it sounds as though, I missed the comment, but it sounds as though Hynes is going to address the penalties, because this is exactly right. You're playing with fire, because it's pretty much the entirety. It's the same combination of players. The effort has been much better on the penalty kill, but you really run the risk, especially against these good teams on the power play. You really run the risk of putting yourself in position to where you give up the go-ahead goal. And again, as I noted, I didn't think Vancouver's power play looked particularly sharp here tonight. If they would have been on their game, maybe they come away with a goal and you end up with a different story as to what happened here today. But credit to the Wild penalty kill for doing the job. But again, your penalty kill is better the less it is utilized, the fewer times it's utilized in a game. Now finally getting back to the couple players in particular. Some people are being forced into the lineup, a couple misfits. The back end of the defense is unreliable. I think we're picking up what you're throwing down. So I'm glad that my subtlety kind of snuck in with those two guys. But yeah, it's tricky to try to navigate with those two in the lineup, assuming that you're just not going to give up goals. John, what's happening? We are shooting for a low first-round pick. If they squeak into the playoffs, they'll get manhandled by Vegas or Dallas, a surefire bloodletting first-round defeat. And look, I don't disagree here because I think everybody is on the same page as to ultimately, with everything that's going on with this franchise, with the money that they are not able to currently spend, with the roster construction, it's a hard sell. It's a hard ask to get this team deeper into the postseason than some of the others that are at full cap capacity, that have franchise players, that have elite level goaltending, and just have lineups that make you want to vomit anytime you go up against them. But this is what the objective is for this franchise every single season, is to get to the postseason. That is the benchmark for this team. It's not make a deep run. It's not get yourself to be a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. As of right now, the objective for this team, the metric for success is, I'm going to steal this from Christian Ponder back when he said it, because I thought it sounded weird back then. It sounds weird now. Our goal is make playoffs. That's it. That's the objective. And so if you make the postseason, you consider that a success, which is why you hear in the instance of Bill Guerin saying after last year that he didn't think the season was a failure. You made the playoffs. That's the objective right now. And so until that mindset changes, until you realize that you're going to have to pull back a little bit and really legitimately take a hard look at this thing and start to cultivate, you're going to continue to do the same thing. So, I mean, the goal right now continues to be get to the playoffs, and that's it. Like Colorado, they fell out of it. Guess what they ended up getting rewarded for? Cale Makar and Nathan McKinnon. Tampa Bay, they fell to the bottom of the barrel. They ended up getting Steven Stamkos and Andrei Vasilevsky. Like, in order to get those like franchise altering players, and I know it's not an end all be all, because if it was, more teams would do it. It's not an end all be all. Edmonton getting Connor McDavid, they came close one time to getting to the Stanley Cup final. And that was ended because Mike Smith couldn't stop a puck that was sent towards him from dead center of the ice. It's not an end all be all, but a lot of teams that win Stanley Cups have players that they got because they were bad. That's just as simple as it is. And so if we continue to just hold the benchmark of getting to the postseason is a success, then you're going to continue to draft 21, 22, 23. And honestly, for me, it's even with that big picture in there, even with that big picture in front of us, like, I still enjoy it more when this team wins. And so I put the blinders on to see the team win because winning is fun. And there's not enough of it that's done here in the state of Minnesota. I mean, I had the Vikings game on directly next to the Minnesota Wild game here today. And you want to talk about ways that Minnesota teams find to lose games? That was a masterclass by the Minnesota Vikings today in how to lose a game. But we're not here to talk about the Vikings. We're here to talk about the Minnesota Wild. And so until this team says, yeah, we need to take a step back and really look at this thing, because guess what? Guess what the other part to this is? You've seen what you can get from young players, from Brock Faber, from Marco Rossi. Matt Boldy's still young and continuing to do some really good things. Youth can always take what the expectations are for them and elevate them by rising to the opportunities. A lot of times with veteran players, what you see is what you get. So until this team acknowledges that simply getting to the postseason is not a good reason to get there, then we just continue to full steam ahead for the playoff push. Yeah, it's big sigh after that one. Let's get back to some of the comments here before we call it an afternoon. Faber reminds me of Scott Niedermayer of the cup-winning Devils fame. Smooth skating, smart, super calm, just a leader and a winner. He needs the C. And John, I think he will get it at some point. I don't know when, but I think Brock Faber is going to be future captain. Just we may as well just start acknowledging him as future captain Brock Faber, because he has all the temperament. Every bit of the equation for a great defenseman, but also a great leader. He has every single objective crossed off already that you would look for in that type of a player. And the fact that he's here is exciting. You've got Spurgeon right now, but Spurgeon's not going to play forever. And I think Faber is, I think you hand it to him the moment that Jared Spurgeon retires or moves on. You hand it to him the moment that happens, and you just go with it, because he already, every bit of what you would want, every bit of what you would want in a captain, he already is. And he's only going to continue to get better as his career unfolds. So future captain Brock Faber is absolutely the answer for the question of who should be the future captain. It's Brock Faber. Bob joining us. Thank you for giving the smash the like button boost here. We always love having these postcasts after games, win or lose. If it's a loss, we go a little further into some of the things that likely led to the loss. Let's get Merrill's minutes down even more, please. I'm in favor of that. We always like to get the conversations continued, regardless of whether this team wins or loses, because I think, as Mike points out, we're not gonna candy coat it. I don't think even if this team were to go on some sort of a massive heater beyond what they've done, I don't think it's a team that's got a good shot at, a Stanley Cup run this year. It's just, with what they currently have, it's not something that is going to be incredibly easy for them. And so, we always are keeping that future goal in mind. And if it's something that I don't view as attainable, I'm not going to try to dream my way into it, because that's just miserable on myself. Is you get your hopes up and that sort of a thing doesn't happen. That's just no fun. So we always keep it 100% here on Locked On Wild. And so everybody that appreciates listening to episodes on a daily basis, we thank you, because I do this for all of you. So the fact that we've got a very healthy listener base to continue to tune into episodes when it's going good, when we have the opportunity to talk about the good stuff, or like this last week when some of the bad happens. We're going to tell it how it is, no matter what's going on with this team, because that's what the fans deserve. So I think that is about all I have for today's show. Now, I did see John had a comment here in regards to what has been going on with Bill Guerin, and I'm not ducking it. It's just there's a lot of speculation going on as to what is happening and what will continue to happen with this, because if you listen to Michael Russo's appearance with Dan Barrero on KFan on Friday, it's not over. But for the sake of just purely speculating, we'll just continue to react to stuff after it happens, and that's about all we can do with that situation. Bob noting the lunchbox work ethic keeps everyone back. Then when they show up, winning 8 of the last 10 is great. Hope it goes longer. I agree. Let's continue to keep this winning going, because it distracts from all the other stuff that's going on. But yeah, we'll keep you up to date on Wild wins, Wild news, Wild notes, all of that. And so if you have yet to, although I know everybody in the comment section here has, if you have yet to subscribe to Locked On Wild, make sure that you do, because otherwise you are missing out. And let your friends know too that if they haven't subscribed, great source for Minnesota Wild news and information, as well as game breakdowns, is right at their fingertips by just looking for Locked On Wild on social media. So appreciate everybody hopping into the comments section here for today's postcast, but that is going to do it for today. The Minnesota Wild pick up a 2-1 shootout win over Vancouver. Pittsburgh next up on Monday. We'll chat about that game with Alex Micheletti for your Victory Micheletti Monday episode of Locked On Wild. We get another Victory Micheletti Monday, which is great. So make sure to tune in for Monday's episode. Until then, enjoy the rest of your weekends. Your Minnesota Wild are now 12-4 on the season, and you can follow along for the rest of the season, whether that includes a postseason run or not, by following along with Locked On Wild. New episodes, all yours, every Monday through Friday, as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.